People often ask me, Greg, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to do a book of cocktails? Kind of weird about that, right? Like, I feel like there's so many books on cocktails out there. Do you need another book on cocktails that have, like, I don't think so. Like, if I did a book on cocktails, I would want to write like a textbook that somehow like opened new avenues of research. Like Imbibe was phenomenal. I think that's a really valid book. I think that obviously I'm always talking about Liquid Intelligence. These are like extremely useful books. They have a real reason to exist. We needed those books, okay? I needed them. Most cocktail books, and this is nothing really against them, they're just lists of recipes, and I don't really have much of an interest in that. So I had this idea for a book, which this is going to sound highfalutin. It's going to sound very egotistical. But hear me out. It's kind of like a memoir, where I would tell stories and essays and stuff like that, but they would have cocktails in them, right, with recipes in the sidebar, which is kind of like how I approach the show as it is, right? So it's like a written version of how to drink, or what I would imagine a written version of how to drink would be like. Not a lot of interest in that, but that's my idea for a book. It wouldn't just be that. Like, I had ideas for like sections on how I would develop cocktails, like what is my process like, and helping you develop cocktails using that process, my thoughts on balance, what I go through specifically when I'm adapting drinks from like literature, movies, pop culture, fantasy realms, that kind of stuff. So I mean, it had useful stuff in it. The idea was to be funny, useful, and full of recipes. Some classics, some originals, right? I'm really bad at knuckling down and doing this work because I haven't felt like there's a ton of interest in it. But I did write what I think is the first chapter. It's like kind of even a first draft of the first chapter. And I wrote it, and then I went back through and I figured out where I could work cocktails into it. But I'm not doing cocktails over here on this channel, so I'm just gonna read what I wrote. I wrote this to be read in your brain, like you read a book. But I'm gonna try and perform it. I don't know if that's gonna work or not. But this was like the first few pages of what I wanted this book to be. If you're a publisher and this sounds good to you, let me know, because I'll do it. We'll get my agent and we'll have lunch, we'll talk business, we'll figure out the advance. That's an important part of this whole equation, and I'll write this fucking book for you. I'll do it. Anyway, without further ado, this is what I thought the first chapter of a book that I still might write would sound like. Ahem. So some would call my father a character, others a rascal, a ne'er-do-well, a cad. His friends called him Weasel. I'd call him a fairly severe alcoholic and polysubstance abuser. And I recognize that this is maybe a very dark place to start what is ostensibly a cocktail guide. However, as I intend to begin this book focused on the drinks of a young man, it seems only fitting to frame it in that. All right, you wait my youth, and facts is facts. Now, my dad was something of, I keep talking about him in the past tense. I should talk about him in the present tense. He's not dead. He got close, but he's not dead. Now, my dad is something of a vagabonding jack of all trades who actually hitchhiked to Florida when he was 14 and stayed there a time, working in construction and such. And though by the time I had come along, he did in fact manage to stay in one place and work 3 careers through my youth, he had by that time acquired a vast array of what I can only call rascal's knowledge from his life of very poor decisions and reckless abandon. He sought fit to impart this hard-earned wisdom on me at every opportunity. For example, so picture 1994. I'm 11 years old and I'm sitting on a bar stool beside my dad in the middle of an afternoon. It's a dark, wood-paneled place that attempts to carry the style of a classic drawing room, the type in which men once wore their smoking jackets while sipping brandy and their wives gossiped over in the parlor. And in reality, this was just the spot where my dad had not yet lost his ability to run a tab. Now, a quick aside on what a tab is in this context, because even in the 90s, running a tab was an anachronism from a faintly remembered past, so I'm going to explain. There was an earlier era, perhaps when my father was young, in which the local bar or tavern would simply keep a tally of what you owed for your food or drink throughout the week, with the expectation that you would come back and pay it on payday. It was basically a predecessor to the credit card. My dad really liked this arrangement, so he'd find older bartenders around town who would let him carry on in this way until the fateful payday, when it would turn out that he in fact did not have enough to cover his tab and we'd be in the market for a new bar. Anyway, the place was mostly empty, and I'm sitting there on the bar stool next to my dad, and he takes a puff off of his cigarello. All right, let me tell you what to do if you ever find yourself in need of money. Like if you need a motel room for the night or something. You have a date, need a shower, I don't know, whatever, right? All you need is a sock and a toll road, like the Parkway, or even better if you're in Florida, or whatever they call it now, because they have no toll booth attendants, so they won't even know. I pick a cherry out of my Shirley Temple and listen vacantly from my perch at the bar. I'm 11 and I've heard this one a few times by now. You get your sock off, all right? You wait on the highway embankment till you know it's safe. There's no cars coming, whatever, okay? And you run out there and you stuff your sock down into one of the toll booth baskets, right? And then you just slip back over the embankment there and take a nap in the grass, have a drink or smoke, whatever. Wait a few hours, wait through rush hour, right? Then things calm down. You slip back over the embankment, you get your sock back, and boom, you got what? $50, $60. Enough for a motel room, a six-pack, and something to eat. And you're sitting pretty. Got me through plenty of hard times. So this is the sort of fatherly advice my dad chose to bestow upon me from his temporary throne at whatever local watering hole he had yet to destroy his credit in. And as you read this, you might be somewhat repulsed by the scene, as I most certainly was at 11 or 10 or 13 or any other number of times I heard this story or others just like it. But I'll tell you, even though I've never sock robbed a toll booth like my dad and his buddy Scott did when they hitchhiked down the length of the East Coast, I have come to a kind of strange respect and appreciation for the wild son of a bitch and his rapscallion ways. In his own way, he was kind of a pirate. Now, people have a tendency to romanticize pirates. You imagine the great tall ships and brass button frock coats, the parrots and the gleaming cutlass, the sparkling jewels, the mountains of Spanish gold. But even Blackbeard only managed to keep command of his fearsome war frigate, the Queen Anne's Revenge, for about 6 months before he bungled it and ran aground and sank off the Cape Hatteras coast. The rest of the time, he was sneaking around in a Bermuda-rigged gunboat, stealing quarters with a sock from the Florida turnpike. This particular Blackbeard found his calling selling insurance, corporate liability coverage mostly. And if you know anything about how insurance works, high seas piracy isn't a terrible analogy. On the one hand, as a business owner, you were staring down the musket and a flapping no-quarter Jolly Roger of unmitigated risks and government requirements. But on the other hand, no insurance company will ever sell you a policy they anticipate ever having to make a payment on, and they're quite good at making sure that they don't. So basically, when it's working correctly, the insurance market is robbery at the point of a sword and pistol. I'm not too sure Dad ever saw it that way, though. He always complained he was too careful and hadn't taken enough risks, plunked himself into a safe job, and stayed put. Maybe so, but he still lived like a pirate. He scored his plunder by day and spent every penny he made in port by night. Never once saw him go to bed. He simply passed out drunk and high wherever he was when his evening overtook him. And this was every night, whether he had work the next day or not. Every morning he woke up like clockwork without the aid of an alarm and did his brief battle with his hangover to fight his way back to the office in search of more loot. He later told me that one of his secrets in maintaining this carefully achieved balance of whiplash self-destruction was to start his day, every day, by swallowing some crystal meth he'd wrapped in a bit of rolling papers, sort of the more responsible time-release version of tweaking your brains out. His thoughts on that subject: oh yeah, I did that for years and years. Started having panic attacks all the time and figured out it was the meth and quit. The attacks went away. Terrible drug. Never get into it. Make you a hell of a salesman though. Unstoppable, like a nitromethane top fueler. Take that for what you will. But a later chapter will provide the proof that he was in fact a hell of a salesman. So knowing me, it may come as some surprise to you to hear that I didn't drink a drop all through my youth. Not until after I was out of the Army, actually. But watching my dad go through life like this, it really did put me off. If the above didn't already let me make this abundantly clear, and now for the second time, my dad is an alcoholic with multiple substance abuse issues on top of it, caused problems and destruction everywhere he went, even though he somehow managed to remain what some would call a functional alcoholic. Frankly, I was actually terrified of turning into the same, and I figured there was a very high chance that I'd inherited whatever gene he had, so I just stayed clear. Not that there was a lot of temptation for me, because unlike my dad's wild life of multiple school expulsions and youthful hitchhiking, I was an absolute nerd. I just wanted to hang out with my friends playing D&D or Magic the Gathering, watch movies, play video games, etc. When I finally did loosen up my fears and realized that in fact I didn't have the necessary genetics to become an alcoholic, it was out of a healthy respect and fear for the substance that I gravitated towards cocktails. Each drink had a history I could get nerdy about and explore. I could obsess over perfecting formulas. There was the time and artifice it took to craft each drink, which limits how fast you can actually consume them. And then the requirements of keeping a well-stocked bar. The uninitiated is going to look around at my over 500 bottles and roll their eyes thinking I'm an alcoholic. I grew up with an alcoholic. they don't have any bottles in the house because they drink them dry. Go out for more and do it again. Anyway, that's as far as it looks like I wrote. If you want more of that, I'll write the book. Anyway, this has been my show. See you guys next time. Bye.